To turn on the speaker. Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe 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 Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda 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 Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Radhe Govinda 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 Gopal Govinda Gopal Govinda Gopal Govinda Govinda Gopal Govinda Gopal Govinda Gopal Govinda Gopal Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Govinda, 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 Gopal, 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 Govinda. Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Jaya Shri Govinda, Gopala, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Jaya 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 Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Govinda, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala, Jaya Shri Govinda, Jaya Shri Gopala.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Sahadev.
Thank you.
Om Namah Shivaya.
I heard it's a Radhashtami, is it? I heard. So,
Yeah, yeah. Very
Radha and
nice. Radhashtami. And so lots of Radha.
yeah,
Wonderful.
great devotion. Okay, Om.
Om
Namaste.
Om. Om Sahana Vavatu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Sahaviryam Karavāvahai. तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. So, picking up where we left off yesterday, Shravanam, listening to the Atma, is what? Is like going into surgery and a non optional surgery. And you can say non invasive, I think, but the Ahankara would like to beg to differ. Ahankara thinks it is invasive because the Ahankara has walls. The walls have to come tumbling down. So it's all just it's all very interesting, because the whole thing is based on paradox. And there is a section towards the end in the Vartika, where Sureshwara says, for that reality which one already is, where is the distance? And then, first, number one, and number two, where is the reason to bridge this distance between oneself and the whole, and that oneness which one desires, which is already oneself? So where is the need to bridge this distance? And then, you bring in one guru, and then you say you are eliminating duality. And then there is a duality between guru and shishya and shastra, all these things. But all this is contingent upon wrong perception, you know wrong perception. And this wrong misperception is what brings about all these things which are necessary for the teaching situation. So the wrong perception makes it, so it's not that the duality is being constructed in the teaching situation. The duality is already perceived by the aggrieved jiva, you know and the duality is already being, what is that, badly negotiated in one's to day life. In fact, one is helpless, hopeless, one is constantly, freaking out, subject to fears and tears, one is in a freak out mode. So this duality is only, you know is only, what is that, highlighted. In fact, the guru shishya relationship is the last frontier of duality. It is where all duality is put to a close, it's put to an end. And so therefore, one has to see this in this light, and see that this elaborate construction of the teaching situation, and with these aids, guru, shishya, shravanam, pramana, all these are aids. Because really speaking, we cannot take ignorance too seriously. So the surgery is an as though surgery of an invisible tumor, but which still, has an effect. That's what it is. So we cannot take it too seriously, because all the things that we are talking about, even Upanishad, like what are we talking about? We are talking about Upanishad one, then we are talking of guru in the whole Shravanam setup, I mean. So number two, we are talking of guru. Then three, if there is guru, there will be shishya. Number three, shishya. Then Shravanam, listening to the teaching. And then what else are we talking about? We are talking about all the accoutrements of knowledge, the appendages such as Shama, Dama, all these qualifications, Shraddha we saw in detail, resolved mind, non reactive mind, all these things. They are all based on this one thing alone, which is misperception. That's why we have to have this scaffolding to address that. Otherwise, there is, we cannot sort of say, otherwise, if we take this to be real, then we cannot say the Atma is limitless. Self shining Atma is indeed Ishvara. We cannot say that. So, ignorance is a very funny thing. Atma Ajnanam is so funny, because on the one hand, you say that, well, I am ignorant. You have owned up the ignorance. That is why one is attending the classes to begin with, because there is a kind of an ownership with that ignorance. I am ignorant and I would like to get rid of this ignorance, is the idea. And so you have owned up the ignorance. And okay, so if you have owned up the ignorance, that means what? We are saying, we are acknowledging and accepting two things. A, there is ignorance, and B, it belongs to me, or whoever is saying this, the one who is wanting the knowledge. So there is even though that's a good starting point. Now, this is an advanced text. The Vartika is an advanced text. And after 10 days of this kind of a study, we are on a different level. We are no longer in the place of, seeing, what is that? A for Atma, B for Brahman, C for Chit, D for Dharma. We are beyond the ABCD of Vedanta. I can go on and on, but I won't. So, we are beyond the ABCD of Vedanta. Why? Because you have to get somewhere. Something should have happened in the course of these 10 days, so we are able to see beyond this whole divide, ignorance and self knowledge, and I have to get from A to B. So the problem with this, I mean, it's a good fundamental starting point. Like the child is told, like this is how, look to the left, look to the right before you cross the road or whatever. But then, if the child goes to another country where the driving is on the other side, then it will have to be given the opposite instruction. And it'll have to sort of adapt to that. So here too, the instruction is sound. But, you know, in between all this infrastructure, in the midst of all this infrastructure, we have to remember that ignorance is not real, and that one is not really suffering from ignorance. This is only on the level of the relative, because that which is real, sat, cannot be removed, cannot be negated. Abadhitam sat. The first definition of that which is real in Sanskrit is abadhitam sat. Sat means what? Real. Abadhitam. Abadhitam sat. And then, it sat has another definition. And what is that? Trikalepi yat tishtati iti sat. So, trikalepi tishtati means it is unchanging in the past, in the present, in the future. It's unchanging. It is unaffected by time. Second definition. First definition, it is non-negatable. So if ignorance is real, then it would become non-negatable. What happened to your moksha? Bye bye. You have to, wave it goodbye. No possibility of moksha. And if ignorance was the same in all three periods of time, then also there is no possibility of moksha. Anirmoksha prasangaha. And so therefore what to do? Then we say ignorance is not real. Let us shut down this operation, even though there is one, two more classes left including this one. Let us shut down this operation, because ignorance is not an issue. I don't have to study. Yay, yippee, school's out. I can just be free. No need for Vedanta. But then what? One shuffles one's way through life. One is just, one can barely lift one's head up. Morning, good mood. Mid morning, bad mood. Lunch was good. So post lunch, nice high. And then after that, somebody said something. So then again, I felt afflicted and affected and whatnot. Bad mood. So it's like a yo-yo life, up down, up down, up down, up down. So in a way, ignorance is very funny, because even though it is ultimately paramarthikataya, from the standpoint of the paramarthika, the absolute reality, from the standpoint of Brahman, it is as good as non-existent. But from the standpoint of the individual psyche, it is not only experienced, but it is experienced as belonging to oneself. It's like my burden to carry, and that's what has to be removed. you know. So therefore, so if ignorance is real, it cannot be removed. If ignorance is unreal, it need not be removed. So what are we going to do now? So this is what is called anirvachaniya. Ignorance is something we really cannot talk about. Because if you categorically talk about it as existent, then there is no upaya, there is no remedy for it. And if you talk about it as non-existent, then there is no need for searching for a remedy, because why do you want to remove something that doesn't exist? Back to our classic example. What is that? Rope snake. So you perceive you perceive the snake in the place of the rope, because of insufficient light. Lighting is not okay, so you perceive the rope. What's going on today? You perceive the snake. Yeah, too much Vedanta. So you perceive the snake in place of the rope, correct? And then what happens? Then when the correct knowledge takes place, then nobody sits and wonders, where did the snake go? Did it slither away when I was not looking in the bushes? Because it is very clear that the snake is a projection of ignorance. So that is why ignorance becomes problematic, because not only does it have a strange, iffy existence with regard to the individual body, mind, sense complex. This is what is called avarna, avarna on the individual level. This is avarna, the covering of my own nature, the concealment of my own nature from my own understanding. And so, because of this concealment, what happens? There is a private projection. Pratibhasika ensues because of Atma Ajnanam. And as I said, Ajnanam need not create problems, because we have dogs, cats, etc. They all don't know their nature, and they seem to be better off than everyone else. They seem to be much better off. They don't have complexes centered on the self. They are free. That's why the Veda calls the animals muktaha. They're already free. They're free of the complexes centered around the self. But the jiva is not. And so therefore what? So therefore we say that the cause of samsara is the ajnanam with a twist. Ajnanam with a twist means ajnanam that has morphed into wrong conclusions. I don't know myself. I mean, not that I don't know myself. I know myself partially. Little knowledge is dangerous. I know a few things about Tvam Pada. I have done my own Tvam Pada Vichara before coming into Vedanta. And what have I done? I have understood that, okay, perhaps I'm not just the body, mind, sense complex. Maybe I'm a little more than this. I know I exist, but this much alone is my conclusion. I know I exist, but then don't ask me, who are you? What is your nature? Because then we will be in a lot of trouble. We'll be in a lot of trouble, because I will give you a whole list, the Jiva says, of all kinds of problems that are coming. This is what is the problem. This is what has to be resolved. And Shravanam means, standing under a downpour, after rolling around in the sludge of samsara for many, 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 many lifetimes. And the mud and the dirt of raga, dveshas, and all kinds of notions are, caked on. Caked on. And then what do you have to do? To stand under a downpour. So, and then that should do the job of what? Cleansing off that which doesn't belong through this very interesting process called vritti jnanam. We saw that in detail yesterday. This is just a summary to and a segue to what's going to come today. So through vritti jnanam, we saw that the caked off dirt, etc., is washed off, and the person says, "Oh, ah, this is me. I didn't know. Oh, this is what I wanted to be." Well, guess what? That's what you are. You know. So Shravanam alone is the sadhanam. Sadhanam means the means of removing both ajnanam and anyatha jnanam. Anyatha jnanam is distorted perceptions. This is what Shravanam is. Then, then the question, there is a big discussion. Why do you need the other two things? Why does Yajnavalkya tell Maitreyi, atma vai are mantavyah nididhyasitavyah? Why does he tell her that? So that means what? That means Shravanam is not enough. Shravanam should be enough, but it is not enough. Therefore, you need Mananam. Shravanam gives 1/3 of the knowledge, perhaps, and then Mananam gives the other third, and Nididhyasanam the third. No, that is not the idea. Shravanam gives the whole knowledge. But when Shravanam is inhibited, you know, when there when there are some blocks to Shravanam, Mananam is advised, so that the blocks are gone, and then one can do Shravanam without inhibition, or whatever one has studied, one can enjoy. That is what is the purpose of Mananam and Nididhyasanam. Manana and nididhyasana do not, quote unquote, produce the knowledge, or do not get rid of ignorance or wrong perceptions centered on the self. They simply, what do? It's like rehab. They strengthen the knowledge that is already there, they make it more clear, they help you to assimilate it deeper, and they remove whatever doubts that may be there coming in your way. That is the purpose of mananam and nididhyasanam. So if there is a block to Shravanam, Mananam is advised. And like I said earlier, you know, um, the people, the students in the Upanishads are not very, they're all ideal type. They're all very highly qualified. Shvetaketu needed a few classes, then he got up and went away. And then, what else? Indra in one of the Upanishads, Kena Upanishad, he just heard once from Haimavati Uma. The goddess Uma came, and in a shining form, and gave him the knowledge. And then he said, "Oh, great, thank you." And then immediately he started to teach Agni and, what else, Vayu and all the other people. And so, these are all Uttama Adhikaris. They were okay with just Shravanam. But then what, Madhyama Adhikaris, there are blocks. There are blocks, which are difficult to remove, and the most of the blocks, are in the form of doubts, starting with self doubt. And therefore, Mananam is advised. Mananam comes from man, to to think. And we have to be very careful here, even though it means think. It's not that thinking about the knowledge however you want is advised. So here what happens is that, in Mananam, before that Mananam takes place, there are some latent doubts. That's why doubt removal is highly, highly important in the tradition. And that's why uh, questions are encouraged. Even in the dialogue, which is known as the Upanishad, in all the dialogues, there are questions and answers. So the student asks the question and the teacher responds. And we see this very overtly in the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, the teaching should have finished in chapter 2. Karma Yoga was given, and then what? The Brahma Vidya was given. There's nothing more to talk about. In fact, Lord Krishna was making tea, thinking that his job was done, and he was going to have some tea and relax or whatever. But then, you know Arjuna asked the question which begins chapter 3. Then, Lord Krishna talks, and then at the end of chapter 3 he asks another question which leads to the remainder of chapter 3, and takes us all the way to chapter 4. Then again he thinks he's going to have a break, and then Arjuna asks a question at the beginning of chapter 5, and at the end of chapter 6, and so on, all the way to chapter 18. And then until ultimately he says, Nashto mohaha. My delusion is gone, is destroyed. Smritir labdha. I finally recall my purpose here in life. Karishye vachanam tava. I will do exactly as you say. It is now clear to me why, even though this knowledge is the highest purpose of life, and I need to pursue it, right now I need to take care of this battle. I know this. So that's why, that is the main reason why there is not a chapter 19 in the Bhagavad Gita, because all his delusion was destroyed at the end of chapter 18. So the questions are encouraged, because without it, this is not something belief based. It's an equation to be understood. You know, like I said, if a fourth grader was told, third grader, fourth grader, 8 to 9 year old was told, 2 plus 3 is equal to 15 minus 20 minus 15. The third grader cannot tell the teacher, Madam, I believe you. The third grader is telling the math teacher, I believe you, ma'am, whatever you say. That doesn't work. So therefore what? So therefore this has to be analyzed, and in the process of this analysis doubts definitely will come, because one is not coming to Vedanta with a clean slate. One is coming with all kinds of notions, familial notions, because of being raised in a particular family, and cultural notions. All kinds of notions are there, and these notions are, what have to be nicely examined under the relentless light of the Shastra. This examination is done partly by oneself and partly with the help of the teacher. This we have already seen. How do you take the help of the teacher? You ask questions. You enter into a dialogue, that is a special dialogue called samvada. Vada, regular dialogue between friends. Like, would you like to go to a movie? No, no, no. I think we should just stay at home and cook something together. This is vada. Samvada, a special word to denote the the very unique dialogue between the teacher and the student. Samvada, where the teacher asks the questions with shraddha. The teacher is not there to sorry, the student asks the questions with shraddha. The student is not there to fight with the teacher and to question the teacher at all times. How come you're saying this? I don't think you know what you're talking about. Then the knowledge will not work. So that's why even in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is confused, and the way he expresses his confusion is wonderful. He says, Buddhim mohayasi iva me. It's as though you are saying two contradictory things. And I'm deluded as a result of that. He uses the word as though to give Lord Krishna the benefit of doubt. He doesn't say, You are confusing me. He says, I am confused, as it were, by your speech. He's owning up the problem as his own. And so from the Bhagavad Gita, we learn how to ask questions, what kind of questions to ask. So this is one part of what is called manana, mentation, where you ask questions, you clear the doubts. And another part of manana, is where you yourself look at the vision of the Shastra, which you have to a certain extent internalized and assimilated. And then whatever doubts come, you put the doubt, you fry the doubt you zap the doubt, in the in the rays of this knowledge. The doubt goes away, because you see, and the doubt comes, is something happening? I've been attending all these classes, is anything happening? Then the answer immediately comes, of course it is happening. Just because I don't see it right now doesn't mean that there is not a transformation happening as a result of this retreat. Of course it is happening. So you zap that doubt, and then you immediately the answer comes, how one is being transformed. Perhaps the answer will come. And so this is the second part of mananam. Now both these are illustrated in the Upanishad itself, and in the commentaries to the Upanishads. So in the Upanishads, the dialogues with the teacher, as I said, illustrate, give the example of how manana is done. And the second one, the self mananam, is also illustrated in the Upanishad. Like when, you know, Bhrigu goes to Varuna, his father, where in the third chapter of the Taittiriya Upanishad, you know, and Bhrigu goes to Varuna and says, Adhihi Bhagavo Brahma, oh revered sir, please teach me the Upanishad. And so Varuna gives instructions. And what does Varuna say? Yato va imani bhutani jayante. Yataha yasmat karanat. Because of which cause, less cause. Imani bhutani jayante. These beings come to, all the elements and everything that has come from the five elements, come to being. And then yena jatani jivanti, by which all these things that have been created slash projected, are sustained. Yasmin abhipravishanti, in which all these things, this whole projection called the Jagat resolves. Tad vijignyasasva. Please inquire into that. Tad Brahma iti. This is alone Brahman that you want to know. And what was that which Varuna said? That was one class finished. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam. He said the closing prayer and sent off the sun. You know? And the sun is doing mananam. And the sun thinks, and probably this was before lunch. So the sun, Bhrigu, is hungry, okay? And then he's wondering, wonder what's for dinner? What's for what's for the next meal? And maybe cooking is going on in the kitchen. And then he starts to think, oh, what a wonderful smell is coming. Very nice. And I should connect with this food. Oh my God. And then maybe food is Brahman, because without food, he said, what did Father, the slash Guru say? Guru said, Yatova imani bhutani jayanti, from which all beings are created. Well, of course, my parents ate food, therefore I was created. And as soon as I was born, what did I want? Hello, I wanted food. And what do all beings want? Every baby tiger, baby giraffe, baby elephant, baby hippo, all of them, without GPS, as soon as they're born, they know the way to the mother's milk, they immediately go there. They don't even know. They don't need a map. Oh, turn left, go here, go there. They immediately go. And dogs and cats, what to talk of? They are born with eyes closed. They also make their way to the mother's breast without any instruction. So, and then if you stop the food, what happens? The person withers away, dies. And then throughout, in order to keep going throughout the life, forget life throughout the day, you need meals. And even the doctors say small frequent meals must be ingested. And of course, now people have forgotten the word small and have emphasized the word frequent. Yeah, frequent meals, small, by some, the word small has undergone what we call in Sanskrit lopa. Lopa means it is missing in action. It is seen as not there, you know so then this is what this is Brigu's conclusion. Why? Because he was hungry, and he saw all he went into a lot of mentation. And then he ran back to the father, because the sooner I'm understanding this and I report back to the father, then what happens? I get my lunch and I'm done. Who knew Brahman was so easy? Very nice. Annam Brahmeti Vyajanat. So he came to the conclusion, Annam Brahma. Annam is Brahma. Annam means food. And then what? When Punareva Varunam Pitaram Upasasara. So then, he approached the father, and the father, squashed his understanding and said, Nah, inquire deeper. And then what? So he was sent off to, and this is again a mentation. Because he had grown up with the father, he knew a few things. That's why the father felt comfortable saying, doesn't matter if he comes to the wrong conclusions, I'm there to correct it. But let him sort of agitate with his knowledge. Let him just, do some work here, some mental work. And then what did he do? Then Bhrigu had another bright idea, because by this time he was tired, no food, and still hungry, and he's still, meditating, contemplating, whatever, going through this manana, everything he's doing at once. And then he says, I feel weak. Weak means what? Prana is not there. Prana is Brahma. Pranam Brahma. So then he goes and reports that to the father, and then again the father dispatches, negates this wrong understanding, and dispatches him back to, Vijignyasasva. And then like that we have, so all the places where he can make mistakes, Bhrigu makes mistakes. First, he thinks food is Brahman, meaning there is a body identification. Prana is Brahman, body identification. What is that? Pranic identification with all the subtle, what is that? The various digestion, circulation, etc. The physiological, identification with various subtle aspects of the sharira, sukshma things. And then what? Then he thinks the mind is Brahman. Naturally, that's the next conclusion he can come to. And then he thinks that the karta, the doer, is Brahman. And then finally he thinks bhokta is Brahman, the one who is done in is Brahman. And all this is negated, but in a very interesting way. Yes, annam is food, is of course Brahman, because there is no food outside of Brahman. Nothing is outside of Brahman. Prana is Brahman. Manaha, mind is Brahman. And then what else? Vijnana, the sense of I am the agent of knowledge. That sense is also Brahman. And I am the consumer of the karma phala. That understanding is also Brahman. Then what is the problem? Brahman is not any one of them. This is what, Varuna has to point out to Bhrigu. It's all one way. Everything is Atma. Atma is not any one thing. And this is what he is taught. So we see this the second example of self, mananam, as an exercise that is done kind of on one's own. We see that in the Taittiriya Upanishad. We see that in the Chandogya Upanishad also. Indra stays with Lord Prajapati, the teacher, for the for a period of initially for a period of 32 years. I want a Vedanta class. Well, here you go. And the teacher has a one word Vedanta class. What is that? The teacher says, da who, what, what, and then nothing. Closing prayers are done. But I have questions. Yes, I'll answer the question. When is the next satsang? After the 32 years. OMG. What is he going to do for 32 years? He's going to do Mananam. He's going to do all the other things where gaining the qualifications, Shraddha, etc. He's going to do. Then after that, again the same thing happens. Same exact thing. The teacher comes, the student comes, and Indra is very excited. After 32 years, the class is taking place, means what? Think of how many people will come. If there is no Vedanta classes for 32 years, then there'll be so much hunger. Everybody signed on, you know. And Prajapati appeared, not on Zoom, in person. And then what happened? And then, he did the same thing. Om Sahana Bhavatu, etc., etc. Om Shanti, 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 Da. And then what? Om Purnamada, Purnamidam. Wait, I have questions. After 32 years. And then, stay with me for 32 more years. Stay with me for 32 more years. Stay with me for 32 more years. Thankfully, in Indraloka, in other celestial realms, a day in the life of Lord Brahma is one whole yuga here. So thankfully, there is a different time zone happening. So we don't see Indra toothless, Angam galitam palitam mundam dashana vihinam jatam tundam vriddhoyati grihitva dandam. We don't see that, where the bones have dissolved. Angam galitam palitam mundam, the head has become a mirror for everyone else. It is so shiny and so bald, Dashana vihinam jatam tundam, the jaw is entirely toothless. And the person is bent in the form of a question mark, a querulous, complaining person, bent over in the form of a question mark, denoting that the highest purpose in life is yet to be gained, permanent question mark. That doesn't happen with Indra. Why? Because of the difference in time zones. And the story goes that he lived with Prajapati for 101 years before the knowledge was totally, ingested. This is what is. So the second kind of mananam, where one just sits and, sits and contemplates on that one word, da, for 32 years. I mean, think of it in now in Kali Yoga. Even to sit for 5 minutes, forget, even for sit for 3.2 minutes is difficult. One is already agitated. One looks for the phone. One looks for something else. One is checking email, updating Facebook, all these things. Somebody from the ashram asked me, why have you given this whole list, of how to how to maximize your shravanam? I said, because this class is about shravanam. That is why. Because these things happen. These things are all just there. It's right there, because it's the same yantra. Yantra means the technology, the computer, ipad, iphone, whatever phone, you're listening. And unfortunately, the word I is associated with the phone, not with yourself and as Brahman. So, therefore, and the same technology is used for listening to Vedanta, and the same technology is also broadcasting simultaneously anatma from all other aspects of the life. You know. So therefore, this is not some, mananam in, I suppose, in present day time, has to focus a lot more on dialogue, and till the mind is quietened. For mananam to take place, the mind has to be resolved. Some resolution must be there to be able to sit with the doubts, to be able to say, okay, what would the teaching have said? What would the teacher have said? You know, how would the teacher address this? Because you've been listening. So now you kind of know what might come as a result of this. And why am I having this doubt? Where is this coming from? That is also another, sometimes a useless, course of enquiry. Aha, this is from that particular issue. So we are not going to address this because it really does not matter. Really does not matter. So therefore, ultimately it's not an issue. But if it helps you to say, okay, this is because of this, and then, I'm not going to deal with it, I'm going to deal with it later. So you have identified something. So this is what is mananam. So mananam takes place as I mentioned, in two ways, both of which are given in the examples, are given in the Upanishad. Both of them, both these types, we have discussed that. Then, the Upanishads are commented upon, because a lot of people's mananam we get when we study Vartika. We get Suresvaracharya's mananam. We are benefiting from the phala of the Acharya's mananam, Suresvaracharya's mananam. When we study Bhashya, we get Adi Shankaracharya's mananam. We get all these kinds of things, because they are presenting the knowledge in a very interesting way, which is very, typical of the tradition. And what is that way? You raise the doubts, you know and you answer the doubt at length, and you dismiss the doubts. Enter therefore a creature called Purva Pakshin. Purva Pakshin means the person who is a contentious fellow, who is a objector, a contentious objector, Purva Pakshi. So Purva Paksha means an objection. And then some of these objections, you wonder where they have come from. They usually deal with the current matas, the current ideological, theological beliefs of the time. Those are our sparring partners, not for trying to sort of have some kind of a victory over them, but to deepen one's own knowledge. We have to see how Vedanta differs from, for example, Buddhism, for example, Christianity, whatever it is, whatever the contemporary thought forms are, and why it is important and why it is necessary. So we have to see this. And so therefore, there is an elaborate structure, and this in an elaborate custom of having this Purva Paksha, the presenting the objectors, the objection from the standpoint of the objector, and then giving the Vedantic response, which is called Siddhanta. And for the one that is new to the tradition, the Purva Paksha is presented so well that you start believing that that is the answer. And then you don't know how to answer this, because you have thought that the objection itself is Vedanta. And this happens in Brahma Sutra. You have to be very, very careful, because there is a slight what's its name there's a slight sometimes as differences are very, very slight. So mananam means what? Mananam is being exposed to this purva paksha siddhanta in the tradition itself. That's why we study Vartika, that's why we study Bhashya, when Upanishad is itself enough. But if you want to go deeper, these objections are brought up because, as I told you earlier, these objectors are nothing other than your own unconscious mind, because you have not grown up in a vacuum cylinder. Okay, you have been affected by the cultural mores and the pre-existent thought patterns and cultural, national, civilizational ideas and ideologies. You are a product of your culture, you are a product of your particular family thinking, and all these thinkings, therefore all these ways of thinking which are coming in the way of assimilating the knowledge, they have to be nicely laid threadbare. They have to be examined under the light of the Shastra. The light of the Shastra makes you examine all the holes. It's like a knitting class. So the child in the knitting class is said, okay, this is the pattern: knit one pearl two, knit one pearl two, some pattern. Well, there's only two possibilities: the needle comes this way and you put the thread that way, or the needle goes this way and you put the thread this way. That's all it is. And so you tell this is should be the pattern. And then what? Then in the beginning you don't make a scarf or a sweater. It's very difficult. So in the beginning, just a square piece is knitted. And then what? All you have to do is take it in the light. And then what? The child would have, maybe there are 10 stitches, and the child would have dropped a stitch, slipped a stitch, and there would be a hole there. And then you point that out. See, this is where the stitch was slipped. And people who are very clever with this knitting, they can pick it up slowly and then bring it to the top with the help of a crochet needle or something like that. So there is a slipped stitch, and here is where you made a mistake. It was knit one, pearl two, but you were thinking of something else, and you have put pearl two, pearl one, knit two. You have done something wrong. So all the mistakes are held under the light, and all the wrong assumptions and what is the light? The light is the brilliant knowledge of the Shastra, which does not accommodate these mistakes. You can accommodate a person, like if you had an in-law who was convinced that 2 plus 2 is 6, or 5, even better, 2 plus 2 is equal to 5, and they argued over it all the time. You can accommodate the person, because you have to live with them, and they're coming over every Thanksgiving, every long weekend they're coming over. And so you have to accommodate the person, but you simply cannot accommodate their beliefs. This is exactly what Vedanta is. You cannot say, yeah, Atma is wonderful, and Anatma is also not too bad. It's okay. After all, whatever is Anatma is Brahman ultimately. So Anatma is not too bad. And then you say, oh, yeah, that is also okay. And then one is all confused. So the knowledge, in the time of Mananam, the knowledge has to be protected. From what? From all other influences than Vedanta. When we would go to Pujya Swamiji so many times, like people would have some big, big books, and they would ask for Swamiji's permission. Can we study this? You know, those of us who knew Sanskrit and all that, frequently go to him, show a book, and say, can we study this? And in one instance, and then he would say yes or no. Mostly he would say no, just stick to whatever is being taught. You don't need anything extra. And on one time, I still remember that one student, one brahmachari, brought this big book, Yoga Vasishtha. It is Vedanta, but it is drastic Vedanta. Very, it's presented in a particular way. It's all true. Presented in a particular way from that particular angle, which, if the person doesn't know fully, can get confused. So the brahmachari said, "Please bless this book, Swamiji. I would like to study this." Swamiji took the book and just, flipped through the pages quietly, just looking around, smiling, and then he kept the book for himself, never gave it back. And the brahmachari waited for the blessed and the autographed book to be handed back to him. Nothing happened. And Swamiji said, "Okay, go. Go attend your chanting class, go do something. Off with you." And then, I was there for some other purpose. I was, taking some dictation. And then he said, you know this is a dangerous time to read this book. That's why I didn't give it back, and I will not give it back. Here, put it in my bookshelf. So I went and put it in his bookshelf. This is what happened. So from that I understood, that is why, the knowledge is protected, because in at time of mananam is not just, just going and grazing on every single thing that starts with v for Vedanta. That is not mananam. you know because you can get misled, because the knowledge is a fledgling knowledge, still learning to fly, still, testing out its left wing, its right wing, and it's just wondering how to balance and how long can I fly. All these things it's wondering. It's falling off the nest. So this is the time the knowledge is protected. So mananam is done strictly in keeping with what is taught. That is exactly how mananam is done. You cannot just go outside of something else and then say, "Oh, but what about that? What about this?" Those thoughts will come. But suspend them for the time being and stick to what is taught, what has been said, and then, what is being revealed, which is really the truth of yourself. So the Purva Paksha is brought about deliberately by the Shruti. Shruti also does these objections, but mostly by the secondary works in the tradition that are highly, highly important for our assimilation. Because these so-called objectors are nothing but, deep thoughts from within the unconscious mind that I was not even aware of. And so they have to be contented with, and they have to be dismissed, and then the knowledge is strengthened. And the day comes, after immersing in Shravanam and Mananam, the day comes where you can read anything written by anybody and immediately see the flaws, immediately see the limitations, and take whatever is needing to be taken, and not go with certain wrong arguments. This is what the whole thing is. So Mananam is like a mental rehab, I told you, after the surgery called Shravanam. So Mananam is a convalescent. A convalescent with Vedantin is doing Mananam. So just like when one is a convalescent, you don't expose yourself to needless germs and everything. You have to stay within the confines of your room or your house, and then you don't move around too much because you don't want any kind of complications in the recovery. And then you follow a strict diet. The doctor says this is what should be eaten, this is what should not be eaten. You just follow it. Here also the doctor, aka guru, will tell you what to read, what to not read, and then this is your diet, this is your spiritual diet to come out of this period, strengthened. At the same time, during the day after surgery, there will be some rehab appointments. You have to go to strengthen the muscles so that they don't waste away. And here also in Mananam, so every encounter with the Purva Pakshin is like an encounter with a dumb bell, pun intended, because most of the Purva Pakshins are very dumb. So therefore, and they make a big noise like a bell, you can say. So you are just, engaging with them in order to strengthen your own, understanding. So, so this is Mananam. Now, there are two kinds of doubts. There we have to see this also. So if mananam is doubt removal, what kind of doubts come? We don't have doubts about the weather, because that's not the subject matter of Vedanta. If you have doubts about the weather, you just open the window, look outside, enough. And if you want to know if it's going to rain later, look at the some weather website. If it's going to rain or if a storm is coming, it will tell you. This is not the subject matter of Vedanta. So the subject matter of Vedanta you know being oneself. So the doubts therefore are just kind of grouped into two, and I have to write this down. The first one is called doubts with regard to the means of knowledge itself. So there are doubts. Why is Shravanam the only means of knowledge? If you have a doubt like that, that comes under the first kind of doubt. And in Sanskrit, it is called Pramanagata Samshaya. Samshaya, doubt. Pramana Gata Samshaya. Pramanagata Samshaya. Doubt with regard to the operation of the pramana. This is the first kind of doubt. I'll explain what it is, don't worry. And then the next one, the next kind of doubt is, what is Brahman? And if Brahman is me, how come I'm not experiencing it? This is a classic doubt. And it doesn't go for a long time. This is what is called doubts centered on that which is the subject matter of the knowledge, namely oneself, namely Bhagavan. So doubts about oneself as Bhagavan, doubts about, Brahman, doubts about Ishvara, doubts that say, what is the difference between Brahman and Ishvara? All these things come under the second category of doubts, which Manana resolves. And this is called Prameya Gata Samshaya. Gata means centered on. Prameya Gata Samshaya. So, pramanagata samshaya, doubt centered on the operation of the pramana itself. Will it operate for me? And it won't. And perhaps this is not, I'm not never going to get this knowledge. These kinds of doubts. And how come if I'm Brahman, I'm still sad? How come if I'm Brahman, I still get angry? This is all called prameyagata samshaya. Very important to know this, because this is what these kinds of doubts are got rid of by mananam, of the two kinds of mananam, with the help of the teacher and by oneself with the light of the shastra, to see where there are holes that need to be plugged. Holes means missing understanding, and dropped understanding, missing understanding. And then where there are errors that need to be corrected, wrong stitches, for example. And then where also there is a kind of a haziness, a vagueness, of knowledge, in the sense that you know it, but then you're not able to articulate it at all. Or you're able to articulate it, but then you clearly know that whatever I have articulated is not in keeping with what the teacher said. There are pockets of fog, vagueness. So, a knowledge that is riddled with vagueness, with error, and with, what is that, doubts, is an inhibited knowledge at best. So, whether it is pramanagata samshaya, doubts centered on the pramana, or doubts centered on the prameya, on the subject matter of what is to be known, both kinds of doubts are eliminated by what is called mananam. That's why, yeah, Maitreyi is given the teaching Atmava are mantavyah. Man plus tavyah, mantavyah. Why? Because if you do Shravanam, this we have to, I cannot emphasize this more. I have to emphasize this constantly. If you do Shravanam And after doing Shravanam, there is no samshaya at all. Then Mananam is not necessary. Not necessary. But if you do Shravanam and then a doubt comes, therefore this Mananam is advised. Like I said, in the Upanishad, we don't see that many instances of Mananam. Few we see, because they were all Uttama Adhikaris. So adhikari bhedat. Then because there is a difference in adhikari, adhikaritvam, this mananam is advised. And so, a little more about what is pramanagata samshaya. Some examples we have seen. So, few more and then we'll take up the other one as well. Pramanagata samshaya means, why should listening to a teacher be the only way to get this knowledge? Maybe there are other ways to get this knowledge. This is a favorite, most common pramanagata samshaya, a doubt centered on the means of knowledge. Why is Vedanta the only means of knowledge? Because as soon as you say only, the jiva who is wanting to be liberated strangely feels boxed in. Only through knowledge. No, why can't why can't I inhale moksha, exhale samsara, take a deep breath, so easy. Inhale moksha as though moksha is around, and then you have to take internalize moksha. And then samsara is creating havoc within me. And so I just imagine that I'm breathing out samsara, breathing in moksha. People do this. And they call it some kind of a kriya, and then they breathing air is free and breathing happens automatically, and you don't even, it's effortless, and then they'll charge you for a weekend retreat of breathing. you know this is all has to be clearly seen. The differences have to be seen. This is why you cannot get it just, and then another one, why can't I just get it on my own? This samshaya is definitely has to do with authority issues, mummy daddy issues that need to be resolved through therapy, through other forms of mananam, etc. Very important to resolve that. Otherwise, anything that is a source of knowledge, one gets angry. One gets angry at the Upanishad, one gets angry at the teacher, one gets angry at Yajnavalkya, one gets angry at Maitreyi, and so one is angry all the time. And where does the knowledge come? Nowhere. How will it enter even? When one puts up blocks and various the huge things. So even self doubt is included in pramanagata samshaya. Everybody else who is signed on will definitely get the knowledge. Oh, that's nice that you have such a good outlook, except me. I won't get this knowledge. Everyone other than me will get this knowledge. This is a pramanagata samshaya. Because I've told you, if you are in front of the pramana, and you will definitely get this knowledge. Well, that may operate for other people. This maxim, not for me. This again has to be resolved. The inner child has to be loved up. The doubter, the quintessential doubter in the form of the inner child, has to be loved up. And another kind of pramanagata samshaya is constantly, finding faults in the pramana. How can listening give rise to the knowledge? And what do you mean? This knowledge does not rise, does not fall, and there is a contradiction. And so these various contradictions are, constantly being brought up. This is the inner child is actually the inner cop that is, calling the shots. That has to be loved up. Give it a little whistle that it can keep blowing somewhere. So there is that inner whistle blower trying to take the lid off the Upanishad and expose it to be fraudulent or to be defective. This is again a childhood problem. All these samshayas arise from unaddressed, uninterrogated issues from babyhood, childhood, etc. Some of them perhaps even from past lives. We don't know. We don't need to worry about that. But at least we can address whatever has happened in this life. So, Mananam is addressing trauma, whether one knows it or not. Addressing previous trauma is a very important sadhana for self-knowledge. Self-care is a very important sadhana for self-knowledge, to prepare one for self-knowledge. Developing self-love is another important sadhana for self-knowledge. And how to do all that we'll see in the next class, in the final class, and we'll talk about nididhyasanam also. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadagya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Some questions are there. Joined late. Is there a list? Yeah, go to the Arsha Vidya web's YouTube channel. It is there in the flyer. You can click on that and then you will get a playlist or something will be there. And then I think so. So all the archives should be there. Okay. Does Sureshwara's Vartika have specific suggestions for Nididhyasanam? Particular item in the particular item numbers in the small booklet from Japan. Tomorrow I will not tomorrow, tomorrow I in the last class I will indicate something, if it is relevant. Okay, I will do that. And then in the for the last many days, yes, it's a wonderful journey. I'm so glad that you were able to be part of it. um, Shravanam gives the knowledge. The question now: do you suggest that one must have a guru or regular Shravanam from Vedantic teachers? Yes, I do suggest that. I'm not anybody to suggest anything, but this is what is not just suggested but insisted by the Shastra. Yeah, it's not an option. This is exactly what has to be done. If there is a rise in some desire to know as a result of 10 days, please don't let that little fire stop. Please continue to listen. Please continue to listen. Do yourself a favor, okay? Yeah. Let that desire for that understanding become a big conflagration. Let it just keep on, and let that conflagration burn up the self ignorance and all its broods. That is my prayer. Okay. Yeah. So one more class, hang in there, come back, and then we will conclude it in the morning. Om Tat Sat. Yeah, Chitra has given the link. The classes will be there in the YouTube. Om.
Pranam Swami.
Om.
Shukriya Swamiji.